I don't know, sometimes I get lonely.
All gunfighters are lonely. They live in fear. You die without a dime or a woman or a friend.
They said Wyatt Earp was a legend, Doc Holliday was a myth, and the shootout that made them immortal, it lasted 30 seconds. But the 1957 film that told their story, it broke every rule in Hollywood. Bogart said no from his deathbed. The stars laughed so hard they got sent home. And one actress asked to be punched in the face just to feel real. These are 20 weird facts about Gunfight at the OK Corral. And the bonus? Even the writer wanted to forget he made it. Holster up, this story's about to get wild. And Number 1. Before Kirk Douglas ever put on Doc Holliday's gun belt, the role belonged to a dying man, Humphrey Bogart. Director John Sturges didn't want anyone else. Bogart had that perfect mix of danger and decay, a face that looked like it had seen everything twice and survived none of it, weathered, weary, dangerous even when standing still. In January 1955, producer Hal Wallace announced the casting with confidence. Lancaster and Bogart, two titans, one showdown, the kind of pairing that sells tickets before a single frame is shot. But Bogart was sick, really sick. Cancer was eating through him, spreading through his esophagus, and everyone in Hollywood whispered about it in studio commissaries and at cocktail parties, but nobody said it out loud. Not yet. By the time pre-production ramped up and cameras were scheduled to roll, Bogart couldn't stand for more than a few minutes without exhaustion pulling him down. The disease was winning. He was dying, and he knew it. His doctors knew it. And slowly, reluctantly, Hollywood knew it too. The dream casting evaporated. So the role went to Kirk Douglas instead. A completely different energy, younger by 15 years, more volatile, more intense, still brilliant, but not what Sturges had originally envisioned. Bogart never saw the finished film. He died in January 1957, just months before it premiered to packed houses. The ghost of what could have been haunted every frame. Because somewhere in the shadows of Douglas's sharp-chinned performance, buried beneath the tuberculosis coughs and the gunslinger swagger, you can still see the outline of the man who almost played Doc Holliday, the last gunslinger who never got his final draw, the role that slipped away. And in Hollywood, those are the ones that linger longest.
Kirk Douglas as the notorious Doc Holliday.
Number 2. Kirk Douglas wasn't just playing a dying man, he was choreographing death itself. One calculated cough at a time. Doc Holliday had tuberculosis, the slow killer of the Old West, coughing his way to the grave scene after scene. But here's the problem that would break most actors. Movies aren't shot in order. They never are. One day you're filming the ending where Holliday can barely stand, dragging himself to the OK Corral on pure willpower. The next day you're shooting an earlier scene where he's still relatively healthy, still cocky, still dangerous. Then you jump to the middle, then back to the beginning. It's chaos, a narrative puzzle shot completely out of sequence. And if Douglas didn't plan every single cough, every labored breath, every moment of physical weakness, the whole illusion would shatter in the editing room. Audiences would see a man who's dying, then healthy, then dying again. The spell would break. So Douglas did something most actors wouldn't even think of. He made a chart, a medical chart for a fictional character. Scene by scene, line by line, Douglas plotted exactly how sick Holliday would be at every moment of the story. Light cough in scene 12, chest-rattling hack in scene 34, near collapse in scene 48. He rehearsed them all in his trailer between takes, practiced the timing in hotel mirrors, made sure each one sounded different, sounded real, sounded like a man slowly losing his war with his own lungs. He knew exactly when Holliday would wipe his mouth with a handkerchief, when he'd lean against a wall for support, when his hand would tremble while holding a whiskey glass. It wasn't method acting, it was mathematics, architecture, engineering, cold, calculated, and absolutely brilliant. Because when you watch the film from beginning to end, you never question it. Holliday gets sicker, slowly, inevitably. The decline is steady and heartbreaking, and Kirk Douglas made you believe every dying breath without ever breaking the continuity. That's not just acting, that's mastery.
See you in Dodge City and thank you proper.
Number 3. Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas had worked together before. I Walk Alone, 1948, 9 years earlier. Ancient history in Hollywood terms. They saw each other at parties after that, said hello at premieres, smiled for photographers. But they weren't friends, not really. Friendly, sure, professional, absolutely, but not brothers, not yet. Then came Gunfight at the OK Corral and something shifted. After shooting wrapped each day in Tucson, after the director called cut and the crew started breaking down equipment, they didn't retreat to separate corners like most co-stars. They didn't go to their rooms, order room service, learn lines. Instead, they sat together, in hotel lobbies, on porches overlooking the desert, in quiet corners where nobody would bother them. And they talked for hours. Long conversations that went nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Sometimes about the movie, about their characters, about the scenes they'd shot, but mostly about everything else. About life, about Hollywood, about the business they'd both fought to navigate on their own terms, about their families, their dreams, their fears. Sometimes the conversations stretched until 1 or 2 in the morning, both men forgetting they had call times at dawn, forgetting everything except the words flowing between them. Producer Hal Wallace would ask what they discussed all night, confused, maybe jealous. But Douglas didn't have an answer that satisfied. "We just talked," he'd say, and it was true. They just talked. No agenda, no purpose. Just two men discovering they understood each other in ways they hadn't expected. And somehow, across those long Arizona nights, two Hollywood giants who barely knew each other became brothers. Real brothers. The kind who defend each other publicly, support each other privately, take a bullet for each other on screen and off. They'd go on to make 7 films together over the next 3 decades. The Devil's Disciple, 7 Days in May, Tough Guys, where they played aging criminals one last time, an entire career built on friendship. But it all started here on this film, in this desert, in Tombstone, or at least the Hollywood version of it, where legends are supposed to be born. And sometimes, against all odds, real friendships are too. Number 4, there's a scene midway through the film that almost never happened. Burt Lancaster's Wyatt Earp is surrounded in a saloon, outnumbered, unarmed, trapped. The tension builds, cowboys closing in, hands on guns, death in the air. Then Kirk Douglas bursts through the door, quick as lightning, snatches a pistol from one of the cowboys, and tosses it spinning across the room to Lancaster. Together they subdue the entire room. It's machismo on steroids, pure Hollywood heroism, and they couldn't film it, because every time they tried, they'd lose it. Lancaster would catch the gun, they'd face down the room, the extras would back off. Then they'd walk onto the porch. Lancaster would deliver his line, "Thanks, Doc." Douglas was supposed to reply, "Forget it," 2 words. But when Douglas opened his mouth, something about the absurdity hit them both at once. The ridiculousness of their great bravery, the silliness of the whole thing. And they'd start laughing, not just chuckling, howling, bent over, tears streaming, completely unable to stop. The kind of laughter that's contagious, that spreads to the crew, that makes it impossible to continue. Take after take, they'd get to that same moment and collapse. Director John Sturges tried everything. He pleaded, he waited. He tried shooting around them. Nothing worked. Finally, frustrated, he gave up. He sent them both home for the day. 2 of the biggest stars in Hollywood, dismissed like schoolboys who couldn't stop giggling in class. They drove back to the hotel, probably still laughing. They slept it off. And the next day, they walked on set, completely professional, and nailed it in 1 take. Sometimes you just have to get the laughter out of your system first.
At O.K.
Number 5. Lancaster didn't need a stunt double. He was one. Before Hollywood, before stardom, before Wyatt Earp, Burt Lancaster was an acrobat, a circus performer, flying through the air on a trapeze with his partner Nick Cravat, nothing but nerve and timing between him and the ground. He'd done it for years in his 20s, traveled with circuses, performed in tents, built a body that could do things most actors couldn't dream of. And when it came time to film the climactic shootout at the O.K. Corral, Lancaster decided to put those skills to work. That famous running dive. Lancaster sprinting full speed across the corral, shotgun gripped tight, launching himself through the air, rolling across the dirt, coming up firing. No wires, no tricks, no clever editing to hide a stunt double. Just a 43-year-old movie star doing what professional stuntmen wouldn't attempt without padding and safety measures. The crew held their breath watching. One wrong move and Lancaster could have shattered something. Wrist, shoulder, ribs, the whole production could have shut down for weeks. Insurance companies would have had heart attacks, but he didn't hesitate. He just ran and flew, perfectly, gracefully, like he'd done it 1,000 times before, because he had, just not with bullets flying overhead and cameras rolling. In a movie full of manufactured drama and Hollywood fakery, That dive was 100% real. Pure athleticism from a former circus performer. Pure Burt Lancaster. And that's exactly why you remember it decades later. Why it's become one of the iconic images of 1950s westerns. Number 6. History lasted 30 seconds. Hollywood stretched it to 5 minutes. On October 26, 1881, the real gunfight at the O.K. Corral was over before most people in Tombstone realized shots had been fired. 34 bullets exchanged, 30 seconds of chaos, 3 men dead, done. But John Sturges couldn't make a movie about that. Couldn't build an entire film around half a minute of violence, so he built it bigger, made it longer, made it louder, turned 30 seconds into something audiences could sink their teeth into. The gunfight sequence in the film took 4 full days to shoot. 4 days of setting up cameras, choreographing falls, timing explosives, making sure every squib fired at the right moment, that every actor hit their mark. Every angle had to be covered. Wide shots, close-ups, medium shots, reactions. Each cowboy needed his moment to fall. Each Earp needed his hero shot. The editors would stitch it together later, find the rhythm, build the tension beat by beat, and when it came together on screen, the gunfight ran just over 5 minutes. 11 minutes if you count the build-up and aftermath. Still quick by modern standards, but an eternity compared to 30 seconds of reality. Critics noticed. Historians complained. The real gunfight happened in a narrow alley, they said, not an open corral. The real fight was chaotic, not choreographed heroism. But audiences? They didn't care about historical accuracy, not even slightly. Because sometimes the legend has to be bigger than the truth. Sometimes 30 seconds isn't enough to make you believe. And Sturges knew that better than anyone. So he gave them what they wanted. Not history, a myth. The version that feels true even when the facts say otherwise. And that's the version we remember.
Well, let me tell you something, Doc Holliday. All them fancy clothes and that smart talk of yours don't make you no gentleman.
Number 7. Jo Van Fleet didn't just play an abused woman. She needed to feel it before she could show it on camera. Van Fleet had trained at the Actors Studio in New York, soaked in method techniques under Lee Strasberg, believed in truth over performance. Her character, Kate Fisher, was Doc Holliday's woman, beaten, broken, loyal despite the pain, and Van Fleet couldn't find her, couldn't access that darkness. So she went to Kirk Douglas with a request that stopped him cold. "Hit me," she said, not as a joke. "In the face. I need to feel it. I need to know what it's like." Douglas stared at her, shocked. This wasn't in any acting manual. He hesitated, but Van Fleet insisted. She needed it. Needed that shock, that violation, that moment of understanding what Kate lived with. So Douglas did it. One sharp slap across her face, real contact, real pain, and something clicked. Van Fleet found Kate in that moment, found the fear, the hurt, the twisted love that keeps someone tethered to their abuser. It's one of the most uncomfortable performances in the film, raw, unflinching, never asking for sympathy but demanding understanding. And it started with violence behind the scenes. Because sometimes to play broken, you have to break a little yourself. Number 8. The song almost killed the movie. Gunfight at the O.K. Corral, sung by Frankie Lane, blaring over the opening credits. Big, brash, unavoidable, and critics hated it. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times called it derivative, too similar to High Noon's theme, a cheap copy. Audiences didn't agree. The song became a hit, a top 100 Western song of all time. But the criticism stuck, because in 1957, every Western wanted to be High Noon. Every studio wanted their own "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darlin'." And Gunfight tried. Hard. Maybe too hard. Dmitri Tiomkin wrote the score, the same composer who did High Noon. Ned Washington penned the lyrics. Frankie Lane belted it out like his life depended on it. And it worked. Sort of. The movie made enormous money. The song became iconic. But that shadow of High Noon? It never quite went away. Even in success, Gunfight lived in another movie's shadow. And everyone involved knew it. Success, but not quite on their own terms. Number 9. The man who wrote the screenplay wanted to forget it existed. Leon Uris, serious novelist, Exodus, Battle Cry, a writer with real credentials. He took the gunfight job thinking he could do something special, something real. He'd researched the history extensively, knew Wyatt Earp wasn't simply a hero and Doc Holliday wasn't just a villain, knew the real story was messier, more morally ambiguous, more interesting than the clean myths Hollywood usually sold, but Hollywood had other plans. The studio read his screenplay and panicked. Too dark, too complex, too real. So they added speeches Uris never wrote, lines denouncing violence and vigilante justice, heavy-handed moralizing. They cleaned up the characters, made them simpler, more heroic, less human, everything Uris had tried to avoid. He hated it. When the film premiered, he publicly disowned it, said it wasn't his work anymore, just a glossy, sanitized version of what could have been something raw and true. John Sturges, the director, wasn't happy either. Despite the box office success, despite the acclaim, he felt the film was compromised. 10 years later, he'd get another chance. Hour of the Gun, 1967, a more accurate, more brutal retelling with James Garner and Jason Robards. That was the one Sturges wanted to make all along. But first, he had to make the version that paid the bills. Welcome to Hollywood. Number 10. Burt Lancaster didn't want to make Gunfight at the O.K. Corral, not really. What he genuinely wanted was The Rainmaker, a prestige picture, a romantic drama, the kind of role that could win Academy Awards and prove he was more than just an action star. But producer Hal Wallace needed Lancaster for Gunfight, needed that box office draw, needed that name on the poster. But Lancaster had leverage. He was a major star. He could say no, and Wallace knew it. So Lancaster made a calculated deal. "I'll be Wyatt Earp," he told Wallace, "but only if I also get to be Bill Starbuck, the Rainmaker's romantic lead opposite Katharine Hepburn. A real actor's role. Nuanced, complicated, award-worthy." Wallace had no choice. He agreed. Lancaster did both films back-to-back in 1956 and 1957. And while Gunfight made millions, broke records, became a cultural touchstone, it was The Rainmaker that earned Lancaster a Golden Globe nomination. The prestige he wanted, the critical recognition he craved. But here's the beautiful irony. Today, decades later, people remember him primarily as Wyatt Earp, not Bill Starbuck. The role he didn't particularly want, the one he only took as a bargaining chip, became the one that lasted, the one that endures. Because sometimes destiny doesn't care what you choose. It chooses for you. And in Lancaster's case, destiny chose the dust and the guns and the legend, not the rain. Never the rain. At number 11, he was 21 years old, baby-faced, unknown. And Dennis Hopper was playing a doomed outlaw in the shadow of giants. Billy Clanton, the youngest member of the gang, conflicted, sympathetic, ultimately choosing death over dishonor. It was one of Hopper's earliest film roles, and he treated it like his only chance. He studied the character obsessively, tried different approaches, made Billy Clanton more than just another cowboy bad guy. And there's an irony nobody talked about at the time. Hopper was actually from Dodge City, Kansas, born there, the same Dodge City where part of the movie takes place, where Wyatt Earp was marshal, where legends were made. So when he showed up on a Hollywood set playing a Western character, he wasn't just acting, he was channeling something real, something in his blood. Critics barely noticed him in reviews. He had maybe 10 minutes of screen time total, but people who watched closely saw it. The intensity, the vulnerability, the rage burning underneath. A decade later, Hopper would become Hollywood's ultimate rebel with Easy Rider. But it started here, in Tombstone, playing a kid who chose loyalty over life and paid the price.
Drawn by destiny to this scarlet dawn, October 6, 1888.
Number 12. The film was shot in VistaVision. Not standard format, not ordinary Technicolor. VistaVision, Paramount's premium widescreen process that captured twice the image area of regular film. The difference was staggering. Colors popped, details sharpened. The Arizona desert looked like you could reach out and touch it. Cinematographer Charles Lang shot it like a painting, every frame composed, every shadow deliberate. He'd worked on The Virginian, The Man from Laramie, films that made the West look mythic. But this was different. This was bigger. The landscapes around old Tucson, the mountains, the sky stretching forever. All of it captured in a format that made audiences gasp. Studios usually saved VistaVision for their biggest releases, biblical epics, major musicals. And here it was, lavished on a Western. Because Paramount knew. They knew Lancaster and Douglas together was lightning. They knew the story would sell, so they gave it everything, made it look expensive, made it feel important. And when audiences saw it on those massive 1950s screens, curved and towering, they didn't just watch a gunfight, they lived it. Number 13. Edith Head designed every costume, every single one. And in Hollywood, that name meant something. 8 Oscars, 35 nominations. The woman who dressed Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, Elizabeth Taylor, and now she was dressing cowboys. Head didn't do westerns often. She was known for glamour, elegance, high fashion. But Hal Wallace wanted the best, so he got Head, and she delivered. The men's costumes were traditional Western standard gunfighter outfits, nothing revolutionary. But the women? Head went bold. Rhonda Fleming's dresses popped in reds and blues, colors that shouldn't work in the Old West but somehow did. Jo Van Fleet's saloon outfits balanced elegance with desperation, telling Kate Fisher's story without a word of dialogue. Head understood something most costume designers missed. Westerns aren't about historical accuracy. They're about archetypes, icons. So she didn't dress people like they actually dressed in 1881, she dressed them like we wanted to believe they dressed. Bigger, brighter, more memorable. And it worked. Because 50 years later, you still remember what they wore. Number 14. The film made $4.7 million on its first run, in 1957 dollars. That's roughly $50 million adjusted for inflation. A massive hit, one of the highest-grossing westerns ever made at that point. Studios noticed. Audiences were hungry for big-budget westerns with major stars. Not just B-movie programmers or serial television. Real films, real money, real spectacle. Gunfight at the O.K. Corral proved the formula worked. 2 marquee names, a legendary story, technical excellence, and suddenly every studio wanted their own version. More westerns flooded production, bigger budgets, better directors. The genre's golden age reached its peak. But here's what nobody predicted. Within a decade, it would all collapse. Television would kill the B-Western. Audiences would tire of the same stories. The genre would need reinvention. But in 1957, in that moment, Gunfight at the O.K. Corral was proof that westerns could still rule Hollywood. And for a few more years, they did. Number 15. Hollywood gossip columnist Hedda Hopper had a name for them. The Terrible Twins, Lancaster and Douglas. 2 actors who refused to play by studio rules, who formed their own production companies, who negotiated their own deals, who took control of their careers when actors weren't supposed to have control. Hopper was old guard. She believed in the studio system, moguls running everything, stars doing what they were told. And here were Lancaster and Douglas tearing that system apart from the inside, making demands, getting approval over directors, sharing profits. It terrified the establishment. But it worked. Both men became richer and more powerful than most contract players ever dreamed. And their success opened doors. Other actors saw what they did and followed. The studio system's grip loosened, power shifted, and it all happened while they were making westerns together, grinning at each other across Arizona sets, becoming genuine friends despite Hollywood's best efforts to keep everyone competitive, isolated, controlled. They didn't just make movies together, they changed how movies got made. Number 16. Look closely at Morgan Earp, that's DeForest Kelley. Years before Star Trek, years before Damn It Jim, I'm a Doctor, not a... became a catchphrase. He was just another working actor in 1957, taking whatever roles came his way. Morgan Earp wasn't a big part, maybe 20 lines. Mostly standing next to Lancaster, looking tough, getting shot during the gunfight. But Kelley played it straight, professional. And somewhere, Gene Roddenberry was watching. 10 years later, Roddenberry would cast Kelley as Dr. Leonard McCoy on a little science fiction show nobody expected to last. It became legendary. But Western fans knew Kelley first, from films like this. And there's another future legend in the cast, Lee Van Cleef, playing Ed Bailey, the man Doc Holliday kills in the opening sequence. Van Cleef was 32, playing heavies in B-westerns and television shows. Baby-faced, unknown. But Sergio Leone was paying attention. A decade later, Leone would cast him in for a few dollars more in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Van Cleef became an icon, the face of spaghetti westerns, cold, deadly, unforgettable. But it started here, getting killed by Kirk Douglas in the first 15 minutes. Number 17. The movie is full of historical lies, complete fiction, and the filmmakers didn't care. Johnny Ringo? Never at the O.K. Corral. He wasn't even in Tombstone that day. Died by his own hand a year later, but he's all over this movie, causing trouble, stealing Kate, antagonizing Doc. Cotton Wilson, the corrupt sheriff, completely made up. The real sheriff was John Behan, and he survived. James Earp getting killed the night before the gunfight? Never happened. He wasn't even in Arizona. Wyatt Earp as U.S. Marshal with jurisdiction everywhere? Historically questionable at best. The filmmakers knew all this. Leon Uris researched it. John Sturges read the history books. But they made a choice. Legend over truth. Entertainment over accuracy. As John Ford supposedly said, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. So they printed the legend, made it colorful, made it dramatic, made it memorable. And audiences ate it up because nobody goes to Westerns for history lessons. They go for myths, for heroes, for good versus evil played out under an Arizona sun. And Gunfight at the O.K. Corral gave them exactly that. Number 18. The film earned 2 Academy Award nominations. Best Film Editing for Warren Lowe, Best Sound Recording for George Dutton. Respectable nominations for a Western. The Academy usually ignored the genre, dismissed it as lowbrow entertainment. But Gunfight was too big, too successful, too technically accomplished to overlook. The editing was genuinely brilliant. Lowe cut the 11-minute climactic gunfight from 4 days of footage, building tension beat by beat, making chaos feel choreographed. The sound work was equally impressive. Every gunshot, every ricochet, every horse whinny perfectly placed. In 1957, before digital technology, before computer-assisted anything, it was all done by hand, frame by frame. They didn't win either Oscar. Lost both to other films the Academy deemed more important, more artistic, but the nominations themselves were victories. Westerns getting recognized, craft getting celebrated, and it pushed the genre forward, proved technical excellence wasn't just for dramas or musicals. Cowboys could be art too. Number 19. 10 years later, John Sturges got a second chance. He'd never been satisfied with Gunfight at the O.K. Corral, the studio interference, the Hollywood polish, the historical inaccuracies. It gnawed at him. So in 1967, he made Hour of the Gun, a sequel, a remake, a revision, starting with the actual gunfight, shot realistically, lasting 30 seconds like the real event. Then following Wyatt Earp's vengeful pursuit of the cowboys afterward. James Garner as Earp, Jason Robards as Holiday, darker, grittier, more morally complex. Everything Sturges wanted the first time but couldn't do. It was better as cinema, more honest as history. And it flopped. Audiences didn't care. They wanted the legend, not the truth. They wanted Lancaster and Douglas, not Garner and Robards. Hour of the Gun was forgotten almost immediately, but Sturges didn't regret it. He'd finally made the movie he wanted, told the story his way. And even if nobody came, even if nobody cared, he could sleep knowing he'd corrected the record. Sometimes making art means making movies nobody watches. Sometimes the truth doesn't sell, and sometimes you make them anyway. Number 20. The final shot says everything. After the dust settles, after the bodies fall, after the legend is cemented, Wyatt Earp walks away from Tombstone, meets Doc Holliday for one last drink, then rides off toward California, toward Laura, toward a normal life that history tells us he never really found. The camera pulls back, the music swells, Frankie Lane's voice returns, and you realize what you've watched, not history, not truth, but something maybe more important. The version of the story America needed to believe, that good men exist, that justice prevails, that friendships matter more than money or fame, that the West wasn't just chaos and violence, but also honor and sacrifice. It's a lie, a beautiful, necessary lie. Because Gunfight at the O.K. Corral isn't really about 1881, it's about 1957, about an America trying to define itself, about heroes we wanted to believe in. And for 2 hours and 2 minutes, sitting in a dark theater watching Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas square off against the world, we could believe. We could close our eyes and see the Old West not as it was, but as it should have been. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.
Men in a raw and relentless era.
Bonus fact: the guns were wrong, completely wrong. Every Winchester rifle in the movie is a Model 1892. Beautiful guns, reliable, iconic. Only problem? They weren't invented until 11 years after the O.K. Corral gunfight. The historically accurate rifle would be the Winchester 1873, But Hollywood prop departments didn't care. The 1892 looked better on camera, sleeker lines, more modern, easier to find. So they used them anyway, same with some of the revolvers, anachronistic models that didn't exist in 1881. Gun enthusiasts noticed immediately, wrote letters, complained in magazines. But general audiences? They had no idea. They saw cowboys with rifles and assumed it was all authentic, because that's the magic of movies. You can lie about every detail, get every fact wrong, and as long as it feels true, nobody questions it. Gunfight at the OK Corral was full of wrong guns, wrong costumes, wrong history, and wrong geography. But it felt true. It felt like the West. And in Hollywood, feeling is more important than fact. Always has been, always will be.